House guests, what are your worst horror stories? When I was 7, I had a sleepover at a friend's house, and my little brother came along too. It started off like any normal sleepover. We watched some movies, played games, and eventually went to bed. But in the middle of the night, her dad burst into the room and woke us up. His voice was frantic, and he told us we had to leave the house immediately because a bakery had exploded behind their house, and dangerous gases were filling the air. At 7 years old, I had no idea what to think, but the urgency in his voice was enough to make me panic. He told us to bundle up, so we grabbed our jackets and rushed downstairs where he was already starting the van. My heart was racing, and I remember looking at my little brother, who was just as confused as I was. We climbed into the family minivan. My friend, her siblings, my brother and I, and her dad sped off toward a gas station, explaining the whole way that we needed to get as far away as possible because the gases from the explosion could kill us. I was sitting there, terrified, wondering if my parents, who lived next door, were okay. I didn't know if they even knew about the explosion. The whole situation felt surreal. When we arrived at the gas station, her mom bought us some snacks. Normally that would have been a highlight for me as a kid, but I was too scared to even think about eating. I kept asking her mom if she heard the explosion or if my parents were safe, but she didn't say much at the time. I remember sitting on the curb outside the gas station, feeling a mix of confusion and fear, trying to make sense of what was happening. It was one of those moments where, even as a child, you realize something is deeply wrong, but you don't have the words or understanding to fully grasp it. A little while later, my parents pulled up at the gas station to take us home. As soon as I saw them, I felt a wave of relief, but I was still so confused about what had happened. That night, after we got home, my parents sat us down and explained that there hadn't been an explosion at all. They told us that my friend's dad had schizophrenia, a mental illness that sometimes made him see or believe things that weren't real. He had hallucinated the whole thing. As a 7-year-old, I didn't fully understand what schizophrenia was, but I knew that something very scary had happened that night. Even though we were safe, the fear from that night stayed with me for a long time. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my childhood. Looking back now, I understand it better, but at the time it felt like the world had been turned upside down for a few hours.